Buddy, it's Dr. Joel Hunter here to talk to you about your Intro to Ethics assignment for this coming week. And in particular, I want to go over with you the essay questions that are going to be on this week's quiz, since that's going to be a new thing for you. What I'm going to do is just give some introductory material here at the beginning. Wait for you all to come in. If you can join the session, that'd be great. And just give you an overview of what we're going to be doing. This is going to be really brief because there are only 4 questions to talk about, but I at least want to go over with you what the readings are like and what they're about. So the topic is genetic enhancement. So this is part of that whole group of ethical questions having to do with things like human cloning, and then the opportunity to enhance our performance as rationally and emotionally and in other ways. So, you know, if you're a sports fan at all, you're familiar actually with some of these moral problems because it's a huge deal in both amateur and professional athletics when you're talking about performance-enhancing drugs. So this is part of that whole range of issues as well. So that's the general topic that this week is about. And you have 2 articles in your ethical life text. That's this one here, which we've only read a couple things in this one, but now we're going to be exclusively in this book for the remainder of the semester. So the first article is by Sandel, and it is an argument for why it is not a good idea to pursue genetic enhancement of our children in particular. And he gives an argument for this based on the concept mainly of giftedness and why that is a valuable thing. So one of the things that you'll notice, or I hope that you'll notice in these 2 articles, is one of them takes the position or carves out an argument against genetic enhancement on the basis of value theory. And so if you remember the first part of our semester when we talked about the difference between doing value theory versus doing normative ethics, you'll see that it's going to be difficult because one is talking about normative ethics, that's the second one, and the first one's talking about value theory. It's sometimes hard to get them sort of talking to each other because they're approaching it with different tools, different philosophical tools. Nevertheless, there are important places in the 2 readings where they come together, and I'll point out a couple of those things because they'll be actually relevant to the questions you'll be asked on the quiz. All right, so yeah, the first reading by Sandel is focused on, approaches it from a value theory perspective. So he thinks that even if it were morally permissible to do genetic enhancement, that we ought not to do it. It's unclear how, you know, he doesn't lay down strict rules about this or exceptions or things like that. There are hints, but nothing explicit. But his main point is to say, hey, you know, let's think twice before we pursue this wholeheartedly once the technology is in our hands, because there are certain harms that we can cause ourselves as a result of doing this that maybe we haven't thought through. Anyway, right, so Sandel gives this argument based on the value primarily of giftedness, and that's the key concept. And so he has some other really important concepts that you'll be quizzed on, like what's hyperparenting, what does that have to do with this, striving versus natural talent and giftedness. He talks about athletic competition as a sort of an analogy for the ethical issues here. So that's a really helpful part of his essay. And then he talks about eugenics. That's the other major part of his essay. And so you'll need to know what that is. You know, what is eugenics? What are the basic ideas of eugenics? And in particular, he talks about liberal versus authoritarian eugenics. And so there's a question about that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. So then the Sovolescu essay, the second one, takes a normative approach. So he's talking about, it's based on a theory of right conduct that he holds, so what we ought to do. And so he makes a really strong claim in favor of genetic enhancement, where he would argue, he does argue, in fact, not only is it permissible to implement genetic enhancement for our children, but that we ought to do it, that it's morally required that we do it if we're able to do it. So in his essay, he begins by pointing out a number of analogies. And so he makes an analogy of, hey, look at, if we say that parents who don't vaccinate their children, for example, are being neglectful or they're being lazy. But in either case, whether they're being neglectful or lazy, that's a moral problem then. And that moral problem then affects the rest of us. So he makes an analogy by saying that, look, if genetic enhancement is a tool in our hands, then we need to not be the neglectful parent or the lazy parent, and we ought to do it for the benefit of the child as well as for society as a whole. So you can look at his argument from that perspective. He also examines the many, many objections, and some of which, this is where one of those points where the two articles come together, where he looks at this objection from giftedness and of the natural problems. Hi there, everybody. Glad to see, is that Corinna? And he looks at some of the objections that come in, and there's like little 3 or 4 sub-arguments of this. And so one thing that you can do when you're reading his essay is see if he's really addressed what Sandel was raising, if he really has anticipated the objection that Sandel raises, and how effective is his response to Sandel's position. So that's one of the places where the two articles do come together. The other is on the topic of eugenics, and so you can look at what Savulescu says about eugenics, and why maybe in one form it has a bad name, it has a bad rep, and that if we do it properly, that is protecting individual liberty and autonomy instead of being coercive about it, that it's okay, and in fact it's a good thing. So you can look at his argument for that. And those are the two readings, and I hope you enjoy them. I also linked in my announcement for this an essay in the New Yorker, I think it is, on CRISPR. So it's talking about hacking genes. So the argument, or the topics at least, are ongoing, and the technology has just become ever more sophisticated and remarkable. And so, just like many other kinds of advanced technologies, it's helpful to hit the pause button and think about, well, what are the implications here if we do this? Just because we can do something, should we do it? Those kinds of questions are what these two readings are inviting you to think about. Okay, so I said that what I was going to do is go over the quiz because I want to give you a heads up on the specific essay questions. I don't want you to take the quiz without having some preparation for the essay questions, because those are you will do a better job on the quiz if you have prepared some answers to them, rather than going in and trying to put something together in the time span that you have. Now, your total quiz time is 90 minutes, which is adequate time to do what you got to do, but it's probably not adequate time to come up with a good mini argument for the 4 essay questions. And I said mini argument there with stress, because this is where your assignment, the mini argument assignment that was spread out over those 5 weeks, if you remember, so many weeks ago, this is where that exercise and the skills that you were being asked to perform, and hopefully I was giving you the tools to do that in the assignment instructions and the feedback and all of that. Now you can apply that same tool and those same skills to these essay questions, because essentially that's what you need to write, is a mini argument. Okay, let me see if there was anything else about preparation stuff. No. Okay, so here's what's actually on the quiz. You've got 12 of your standard kinds of questions that you're already familiar with: multiple choice, multiple answer, and true false. And so you have 6 of those. I'm holding up 4 fingers. Why is that? 6 on the Sandel reading, and 6 on the Savulescu reading. So you have a shorter number of questions, fewer number of questions on the readings of the style that you're familiar with. So that's 12 points right there. The other 12 points, the other half of the grade, is the essay questions. And so now I want to tell you what those are. Now I'm going to read them just so that you can hear them as we're talking here, but I want you to be able to review this. So what I'm going to do when I download the recording of this Periscope session and tweak it a little bit, I'm going to also insert screenshots of the questions while I'm reading them, so that you can see them. So don't be right now, if you're listening, don't worry about writing these down. Just listen to the melodious tune of my voice, and then what I'm going to say about them hopefully will be helpful, and then you can review it by looking at the exact question that's on the quiz. Okay, I'm actually going to start with the 2 questions that are at the very end of the exam, because those are relevant to what I was saying at the very beginning of the broadcast. So let me mention what those are. Actually, here I'm going to do something real quick, because I noticed that my battery is getting low. So if you'll give me just about 30 seconds, I'm going to go get my charger and plug it in. So I'll be right back, okay? Hang in there. Don't go away. You're wondering, how does he even get up in the morning? Okay. Here we go. So question number 1. Explain how liberal eugenics, that's in quotes, differs from old-fashioned authoritarian eugenics. Okay, so that's the first part of your, oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I said that I was going to do the last questions first, so let me do that. Let me back up. Okay, so which of the following normative theories do you think best represents the ethical position Sandel, who takes the anti-argument, takes toward genetic enhancement? Explain and support your answer with specific evidence. So in other words, you've got to quote the text. Okay, your choices of the normative theories that we have studied are natural law, ethical egoism, utilitarianism or consequentialism, Kantian ethics, or contractarianism. So again, which of those normative theories do you think best represents the ethical position Sandel takes toward genetic enhancement? Okay. Then you do the exact same thing for the second reading, which is the Savulescu. So which of the normative theories do you think best represents the ethical position Savulescu takes toward genetic enhancement? Of course, his is pro, right? Okay. And so I give you the same normative theories to choose from. So you will pick one, and then you will explain why you think that best represents the author's position. Okay, so those are 2 of the essay questions that you will have to work on. Now, I don't give you a word count or anything like that. I want you to take the number of words that you think it takes to lay out your position. Just remember, what you have to do is provide an argument. So you have to cite evidence, you have to give reasons in order to establish, the position that you take. If you think, it's ethical egoism, then you need to do 2 things. You need to, 1, you need to demonstrate that you understand what the principle of ethical egoism states. So you have to represent that theory correctly, and then you have to show from the readings of this week how the author then is using that theory or is assuming that theory in making his argument. Okay? So that's your task for those 2 essay questions. All right, now the fun ones. So here's the one I was reading earlier, and what you'll want to do is check out the Sandel reading for that distinction he makes between liberal eugenics and old-fashioned authoritarian eugenics. So you need to know what those terms mean, and that's on pages 437 to 438. So do have a look at that. So first thing you got to do is explain how liberal eugenics differs from the authoritarian eugenics. Okay, and then you answer this question: does Julian Savulescu's argument for the ethics of genetic enhancement fit the description of liberal eugenics? Okay, so it either does or it doesn't. And that can be it perfectly fits, or it sort of fits, or it doesn't fit at all, or it kind of sort of doesn't fit. So there's a range of ways that you can answer, but it does have to be some explicit answer to that question. Does Savulescu's argument for the ethics of genetic enhancement fit the description of liberal eugenics? Okay, so you will need to answer that, and then you will need to say why or why it doesn't. So the why or why not part then is your argument to support your answer. And so that will require you to answer with specific evidence from Savulescu's essay. Okay, so it's a two-parter where you don't put an A part and a B part. What you do is you write one paragraph, essentially. It probably just takes a paragraph. But there will be a sentence in that paragraph that shows that you understand and can explain what the difference is between liberal eugenics and old-fashioned authoritarian eugenics. And so you will need to state what that is. And then you will give your answer, and then the argument supporting your answer as to whether or not Savulescu's position is one that fits the description of liberal eugenics. Okay, so that's the third essay question. Okay, last essay question, and this is a long one, but hang in there. This is, let's see. I'm thinking that you do. Yes, you will need, again, just like with the previous one, you will need to be able to use both essays in your answer. Okay. Savulescu argues for a strong right of parents to decide about genetic interventions on behalf of their children, citing the principle of procreative liberty and autonomy, which states that parents have the freedom to choose when to have children, how many children to have, and arguably what kind of children to have. He extends this to include parents' freedom over their children's genes, and thus to genetic enhancement. Okay, so where you want to go to see this is all preface, right? This is, Savulescu talks about this on page 451. And now we get to the question, does Savulescu's position commit him to agree with James Watson's view that parents should be free to abort a fetus that carries a gene for homosexuality, if such a gene is discovered, dyslexia, or lack of musical ability, or whatever preference, genetic preference, the parents have? And this, for this position, or for this argument, or concern rather, you should see Sandel, pages 435 to 436. Okay, so that's the question. Here it is in different words. Does Savulescu basically agree with Watson? Okay, and so that gets you looking at the two essays and kind of comparing them. Okay, so then you answer that question. It does or he doesn't. And then you explain why or why not. Okay, on what basis do you provide that answer, yes or no? So you say why or why not, and that is then your requirement to explain, support your answer with evidence from the texts. So that's the other part of what you will need to do. Okay, those are the 4 essay questions, and those are the ones that I strongly encourage you, to begin to work on before you open up the quiz. The quiz is 90 minutes long, and you'll want to have at least some notes scribbled down about what you're going to type up, if not an already formed answer that you can then just copy and paste into the text entry field in the quiz. I'm perfectly happy for you to do that. Okay, so that was all actually that I wanted to cover. And what I'm going to do, once again, I'm going to post these questions when I get the video uploaded. I'm going to put a screenshot of the questions so that you can see them for yourself. And you can get to work on those readings and then get ready for quiz number, what is it now, 11, I think, or 10? I'm not sure. But it's a lot. Yeah, so great. And I hope that you enjoy this section of our class, the way we're going to wrap it up with the applied ethics problems, where we're talking about real world stuff, and we're trying to figure out, how we can use the different theoretical approaches we can take to ethical problems to give, substantive answers that are rationally defensible. And that's what I want to encourage you to do, and that's what I'm actually asking you to do on the quiz as well. So enjoy, hope you like it, and I'll be seeing you next time. This is Dr. Joel Hunter, Truckee Meadows Community College, Philosophy 135, Introduction to Ethics, talking about genetic enhancement. I'll see you later.